Captain Lucas Harris stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The hall was full of many different aliens. They all looked at him with cold eyes. Lucas felt their dislike. He was the leader of Earth's fleet. But today, he was not there as a leader. He was there as a defendant. The council said Earth was dangerous. They said humans were too wild and could not be trusted. Lucas tried to explain. He told them that humans wanted peace and friendship, but the council would not listen. They said Earth had broken many rules. Because of this, they decided to banish Earth from the council's protection. They said Earth could never return. Lucas's heart was heavy. He looked around the hall. He saw angry faces. He saw disappointment and fear. He knew that many species feared humans. They thought humans were reckless and violent. But Lucas knew the truth. Humans were strong and smart. They had the power to change the galaxy. The council gave Lucas one last warning. If Earth tried to come back, the council's forces would destroy them. Then without a word, they turned their backs and left the room. Lucas was alone now. His crew stood behind him. They were tired but still hopeful. Lucas looked at them and spoke with a calm voice. "We are not done. This is not the end. We will build something new, something stronger." His crew nodded. They believed in him. They had seen the power of humans. They knew humans never gave up. The ships left the bright hall. They moved toward a far unknown system. The place was empty and forgotten. It was a world no one wanted. But Lucas saw hope there. He believed that this place would be their new home. The journey was long and hard. Supplies were low. Spirits were low too. But Lucas kept his people strong. He told stories of Earth. He reminded them of their strength and courage. He said that this exile was a chance to start over. When they arrived, the planet was cold and quiet. It had old ruins and strange machines. No one had lived there for a long time. Lucas's people worked hard. They repaired the ships. They explored the ruins. They learned from the old technology. Lucas looked up at the stars. The galaxy was wide and full of danger, but also full of chances. He felt a fire inside him, a fire that said, "We will rise. We will not be forgotten." The Galactic Council had sent them away, but they did not know what they had done. They had made humans stronger. They had given them a new mission, to build a mighty empire. The planet they had landed on was nothing like Earth. The air was thin and the soil was rough. There were no cities, no signs of life, just vast empty land and strange ancient ruins. Lucas stood on the edge of a cliff, looking out over the barren landscape. The sky was dark and filled with stars. It was peaceful, but there was also something lonely about it. His crew had begun to set up camp, building shelters out of whatever materials they had. They had no choice but to make the best of what they had. There was little food, and water was scarce. But Lucas knew they had to push forward. There was no going back now. This was their new home, and they would make it work. Every day, Lucas and his crew worked hard. They dug into the ground to find resources, and they explored the strange ruins scattered across the planet. Some of the ruins were made of metal, others of stone. The technology they found was old, too old to use right away, but it was clear that the ancient builders had once been powerful. Lucas was fascinated by what they discovered. He spent hours studying the machines and the walls that seemed to tell stories of long-lost civilizations. They had left behind something incredible, something that could help humanity. With the right knowledge, they could use these old machines to create their own future. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the camp began to take shape. The crew had built makeshift homes and had started to grow crops. They had set up a small farm, and the first few plants had begun to grow. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The people were starting to believe again. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, Lucas sat on a rock, looking at the horizon. His mind was busy with plans. He was not just thinking about survival. He was thinking about the future, about how they could build an empire here on this forgotten planet. The technology they found, the strength of his people, and the lessons they had learned from the past. They would use all of it to rise again. "We are not weak," Lucas muttered to himself. "We are stronger than they think." In the distance, the sound of hammering echoed through the camp. The work never stopped. Lucas knew that they were just beginning, and the road ahead would be hard. But deep down, he felt a sense of purpose, a burning drive to succeed. This was not just about surviving. This was about building something greater than they had ever dreamed. Weeks had passed since Lucas and his crew had arrived on the barren planet. Life was hard, but they had started to make progress. The shelters were stronger, the crops were growing, and the people were starting to feel hope again. Lucas could see the change in their faces. They were no longer just surviving. They were starting to thrive. But there was still much to be done. They had no communication with the outside galaxy, and they were far from any known trade routes. It was a dangerous place to be alone, but Lucas refused to give up. Every day he pushed his crew harder, making sure they used the resources they had wisely. He spent most of his time exploring the ruins, looking for more technology that could help them grow stronger. One day, while walking through the ruins, Lucas discovered something incredible. It was a huge chamber hidden beneath the ground, covered in thick vines and dust. As he cleared the debris, he found a set of strange machines that looked like they could be weapons. They were unlike anything Lucas had ever seen before, their design far more advanced than anything humans had built. Lucas felt a surge of excitement. This could be the breakthrough they needed. These weapons could protect them from any threat that came their way. They could use them to defend their new home, and maybe even to expand their influence across the galaxy. He gathered a team of engineers and scientists to help him study the machines. It was slow work, but after several days they managed to activate one of the devices. It hummed to life, sending out a bright pulse of energy. The air around them seemed to crackle with power. It was clear that this technology was far beyond anything Earth had ever created. Lucas knew that this discovery would change everything. With these weapons, they would be able to defend themselves against any force that tried to take their home. But he also knew that this power would make them a target. The Galactic Council would never forgive them for their defiance. They had already banned Earth from the galaxy, and now they would have to deal with the consequences of their decision. As Lucas watched the machine come to life, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. They weren't just building a new home. They were building an empire, one that would stand strong against any threat. And he was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. Months had passed since the discovery of the ancient weapons. Lucas and his crew had worked tirelessly to understand the technology. Slowly, they began to unlock its secrets. The weapons were powerful, but their real strength lay in the knowledge of how to build more. Lucas had always known that Earth was capable of great things, but now he understood just how much potential humanity had, if given the right tools. One day, as Lucas was overseeing a construction project in the camp, a scout came running toward him. The scout was out of breath, his eyes wide with excitement. "Captain Harris, you need to see this," the scout said urgently. Lucas followed the scout to a high point on the planet, where they could see a ship in the distance. It was no ordinary ship, it was one of the Council's patrol ships. Lucas's heart raced. The Council had sent a ship to investigate, and they were getting closer. This could be our chance, Lucas thought. He knew that the Galactic Council would never forgive them for their defiance, but this was their moment to show that humanity was not weak. They had survived on their own, and now they had the power to defend themselves. Lucas quickly gathered his most trusted officers. Together they made plans to intercept the patrol ship. The weapons they had discovered would give them an advantage, but they would have to act fast. The Council's forces were well-trained and well-armed. It was a dangerous gamble, but Lucas was confident in his crew's ability. As the patrol ship neared, Lucas gave the order. The humans activated their new weapons, sending out pulses of energy that scrambled the enemy ship's systems. It was an overwhelming attack, unlike anything the patrol ship had ever faced. The crew aboard the enemy vessel was caught off guard. They tried to fight back, but it was clear that they were no match for Lucas's forces. In just a few moments, the patrol ship was disabled. The humans had won their first real battle in their new home. Lucas stood on the deck of his ship, watching the disabled patrol vessel in front of him. He felt a surge of pride. They had proven themselves. Not only had they survived, they had struck back. Lucas knew that this victory was just the beginning. The Galactic Council had made a huge mistake in underestimating humanity. Earth was no longer a weak, exiled species. They had power now, and they were ready to use it. After their victory against the Galactic Council's patrol ship, Lucas and his crew felt a new sense of power. The success was more than just a battle won. It was proof that humanity was no longer weak. They had strength, technology, and most importantly, the will to fight for their survival and future. Word quickly spread across their growing empire about the victory. The people who had once feared the unknown now stood taller, filled with pride. They were no longer just exiles. They were conquerors in their own right. Lucas knew this was the perfect moment to build on their success. He began sending scouts to nearby star systems to form alliances with other races. He wasn't interested in ruling through fear alone. Lucas believed in the power of cooperation, but only if the allies respected Earth as an equal, not as a subject. It wasn't long before one of the systems responded. The Vril, a race of advanced engineers, had heard of Earth's rise and wanted to meet. They were cautious but impressed by the humans' resilience and growing power. A meeting was arranged, and Lucas personally attended. The Vril leaders were skeptical at first. They had seen many empires rise and fall, but Lucas's calm confidence and clear vision for the future caught their attention. He didn't ask for their help. He offered them a partnership. He spoke of mutual benefit, shared knowledge, and the promise of a future where both their peoples could grow stronger together. The Vril, recognizing the value in Lucas's words, agreed to an alliance. They shared their advanced knowledge of energy systems, allowing Earth's fleet to grow even stronger. With the Vril's help, Lucas was able to expand their technological reach, and soon Earth had one of the most advanced fleets in the galaxy. But even as the alliances grew, Lucas knew there would always be challenges. The Galactic Council would not forget their defeat. They would not let Earth's rise go unchallenged. One evening, as Lucas walked through the camp, he overheard a group of his officers talking. They spoke of the next step, their next target. Some were eager to strike at the heart of the Galactic Council, to make them pay for their betrayal. Others were cautious, understanding the risks of taking on such a powerful enemy. Lucas listened carefully. He knew the time would come for them to strike. But for now, they needed to build. They needed more allies, more strength. With each passing day, they were growing closer to their goal of building a mighty empire that would never be underestimated again. The galaxy was changing, and Lucas could feel it. Every day, his empire grew stronger, and his reputation spread farther. Earth, once an outcast among the stars, was now a rising power to be reckoned with. But with strength came attention, and Lucas knew the Galactic Council wouldn't stay quiet forever. A few months after the successful alliance with the Vril, Lucas's worst fear came true. A large fleet of council ships appeared on the edge of the system, their dark shapes looming in the distance. Lucas knew what this meant. The council had finally come to deal with Earth. They had waited long enough, but they had underestimated one thing: the humans were ready. Lucas stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching as the enemy fleet approached. His crew was calm, focused, and ready for battle. They had trained for this moment. Lucas had made sure they were prepared for anything the council might throw at them. This was their time to prove that they had the power to defend themselves. "Open all channels," Lucas ordered. His voice was steady, but there was a fire in his eyes. "Let them know we're not afraid." The communication systems hummed to life, and the council fleet's lead ship appeared on screen. The commander of the fleet, a tall alien with a deep voice, spoke coldly. "Lucas Harris, this is your final warning. Surrender your ships and leave this system at once. You have no place in the galaxy." Lucas didn't flinch. He stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back. You banished us once, but now you come to fight. I think it's clear who has the power now. We won't be leaving. We're here to stay." The alien commander's eyes narrowed. "Then prepare to be destroyed." Without hesitation, the enemy fleet moved in. The first wave of council ships launched their attack, firing powerful energy blasts at Lucas's fleet. The battle began. The sky lit up with explosions and the sound of weapons fire filled the air. But Lucas's ships were faster, more maneuverable. Their advanced technology, combined with the Vreel's knowledge, gave them an edge that the Council never expected. As the battle raged on, Lucas's ships fought back with precision and skill. They fired back with their new weapons, and the Council fleet began to retreat. One by one, the enemy ships were disabled. It was clear the Council had underestimated humanity. After hours of fierce fighting, the enemy fleet was broken. The Council had been defeated. Lucas stood tall, his heart racing. His crew cheered, but Lucas knew this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy had seen Earth's strength, and they would never forget it. The victory over the Galactic Council's fleet was a turning point. Lucas and his people had proven their strength, but they also knew that this would not be the end. The Galactic Council would not simply accept their defeat. It was only a matter of time before they would come back, with more ships, more forces. Lucas had to prepare for that moment. With the Council temporarily pushed back, Lucas turned his attention to expanding their empire. He needed more allies, more resources, and more territory. The time for building was now. The humans, with their newfound confidence, worked harder than ever to grow their influence. They built stronger ships, fortified their colonies, and developed new technologies. They were no longer just survivors, they were now builders of an empire. The first step was to send ambassadors to more distant star systems. The humans needed to prove that they were not just a military power, they were a peaceful, stable force that could bring prosperity to any race willing to join them. They sent ambassadors to the Nerians, a race known for their wisdom and long lives. The Nerians were a powerful, ancient race, and their knowledge of the galaxy was unmatched. If they could form an alliance with the Nerians, it would strengthen Earth's position in the galaxy. When the ambassadors returned, they brought good news. The Nerians had agreed to an alliance. They saw potential in the humans, and their wisdom would be invaluable in shaping the future of the new empire. With the Nerians' advanced knowledge of diplomacy and strategy, Lucas knew that they could now take on the rest of the galaxy. But even as Lucas celebrated this new alliance, he knew that the Galactic Council was not finished. They were gathering their forces again. This time they would come with everything they had. Lucas couldn't waste any more time. He had to strike fast and strike hard. The next step in their plan was to secure more systems. Lucas sent out fleets to claim planets and resources, slowly, but surely expanding their borders. Every victory was another step toward building a stronger empire. Earth was no longer a single planet. Now it was a rising galactic power. Lucas knew that the galaxy would soon take notice, and he wanted them to know that Earth was a force to be reckoned with. As his empire grew, so did his confidence. They were no longer just defending themselves, they were taking control. Lucas could feel the eyes of the galaxy on them, and he was ready. His people had been through so much, and now they were on the brink of something great. The time had come for Lucas to face the Galactic Council once again. The peace they had briefly enjoyed was over. After their defeat, the Council had spent months regrouping, building a new fleet, and preparing for the day they would return to finish what they started. The galaxy was watching, and the humans knew that their next move would determine their future. Lucas stood in the command center of his flagship, staring at the display screen. The Council fleet was coming. This time they had brought everything. Their ships were larger, faster, and more powerful than before. Lucas knew this would be their biggest challenge yet. He had prepared for this day, but even with all the strength of his new empire, the odds were still high. He turned to his crew who had gathered around him. They were ready, their faces serious but determined. The battle ahead would not be easy, but Lucas knew his people had what it took. They had fought hard to get to this point, and they would fight even harder to protect their new empire. Stay calm, Remember everything we've learned, Lucas said, his voice steady and filled with resolve. We're not just defending ourselves this time. We're defending everything we've built, and we're not going to lose. The battle began without warning. The Council fleet opened fire, launching wave after wave of energy blasts. Lucas's fleet responded quickly, their weapons firing back with deadly accuracy. The sound of explosions filled the air, and the stars seemed to flicker with the light of battle. Lucas watched as his ships engaged the enemy. His people were quick and efficient, using their advanced technology to outmaneuver the Council's ships. The Council's fleet was powerful, but Lucas's fleet was faster and more agile. He had made sure that they trained for this moment, and it showed. The fighting was intense. Every ship in Lucas's fleet was in action, and the explosions lit up the dark void of space. But as the hours passed, the tide began to turn. The Council's ships were starting to fall. One by one, they were disabled by the powerful weapons Lucas's people had built. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the last Council ship was disabled. The battlefield was quiet, the stars once again calm. Lucas's fleet had won. They had defeated the Galactic Council once and for all. His crew cheered, but Lucas stood still, his eyes fixed on the empty space before them. He knew this victory was more than just a battle won. It was the end of an era. The Galactic Council was no more, and humanity, the once exiled species, had finally taken its place among the stars. With the fall of the Galactic Council, Lucas stood at the edge of a new era. His empire, built from nothing, now stood strong. The battle had been hard, but they had succeeded. Humanity had not only survived, they had risen to become a powerful force in the galaxy. The galaxy had seen Earth's strength, and now it would have to reckon with it. No longer were the humans just an afterthought. They were leaders, commanders, of a mighty empire. But even as Lucas stood victorious, he knew there was much more to do. In the months after the battle, Lucas worked tirelessly to strengthen the foundation of his empire. He sent ambassadors to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, meeting with new alien species, forming alliances, and bringing new worlds under Earth's protection. The people of Earth were not interested in ruling with an iron fist. They wanted peace, prosperity, and growth. They offered the same to anyone who was willing to join them. Earth's new allies, including the Vril and the Nereians, brought more than just their advanced knowledge. They brought a sense of unity, a belief in something greater than anyone, race. Together they began to build a new galaxy, one where cooperation and respect were the cornerstones. But not everyone was willing to accept the changes. There were still those who feared the rise of humanity. Some resisted the idea of a united galaxy, where Earth had so much power. These factions were small, but they were dangerous. They would stop at nothing to tear down what Lucas had built. Lucas knew that the battle for peace would not be over. There would always be threats, always those who sought to destroy what had been built. But Lucas also knew that humanity had something that no other species had: resilience. No matter how many challenges they faced, the people of Earth would always rise again. Years passed, and the united Earth Empire grew even stronger. The galaxy was peaceful, and many species lived in harmony. The borders of Earth's empire stretched, far from the once-forgotten systems to the most distant stars. And yet, Lucas always remembered the early days, the struggles, the exile, the long road to where they were now. As he stood on the balcony of his palace, looking out at the stars, Lucas felt a deep sense of pride. His people had done the impossible. They had turned their exile into triumph, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that Earth was not just a planet to be ignored, it was a force to be respected. The years that followed were filled with growth and challenges. Lucas's empire continued to expand, and the people of Earth thrived under his leadership. Their strength, once seen as a threat by the galaxy, was now recognized as a symbol of hope and resilience. The once exiled humans were now at the heart of a new order in the galaxy. Lucas, now an older man, stood at the helm of his empire. He had seen so much in his life: the exile, the battles, the victories, and the alliances. But more than anything, he had seen the strength of humanity, It was not just in their weapons or technology. It was in their spirit, their ability to adapt and grow no matter the odds. One evening, as Lucas walked through the palace, he thought about the future. His work was far from done. There were still systems to protect, new allies to bring into the fold, and dangers to face. But he also knew that the future of Earth was secure. His people had proven themselves to the galaxy, and the galaxy had accepted them. Lucas's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. He turned to see one of his trusted officers standing in the doorway. The officer saluted and then stepped forward. "Sir," the officer said, "the ambassadors from the new systems are here. They request to meet with you." Lucas nodded and followed the officer. As he walked down the grand hall, he thought about all the systems that had joined Earth's empire. They were small at first, just a handful of planets, but now the United Earth Empire spanned across many sectors. Each new alliance was a testament to what humanity had achieved. The meeting with the ambassadors went well. They spoke of peace, trade, and the future. Earth had become the center of the galaxy's new order. The once distant species now looked to humanity for leadership, and Lucas had no intention of letting them down. Later that night, as he stood on the balcony overlooking the shining city below, Lucas felt a sense of peace. The empire was strong, but more importantly, it was just. It was a place where all species could find safety and prosperity. It was a place where Earth's once exiled people had found their place in the stars. Lucas knew that his work would never be truly finished, but as long as humanity continued to rise, he would continue to lead them. The future was bright, and he had no doubt that humanity would continue to build a legacy of greatness in the galaxy.